You're tuned to Risky Business. And in the studio, who better ever than to have, other than the Honorable Dr. Louis Castens. I've never called you doctor yet, Louis, but Dr. Louis Castens. Louis, welcome back to the show.
Hello, Brian. It's really wonderful to be a guest on your show again. I remember the last one. I had a lot of fun, enjoyed it, and looking forward to today. And thanks for the invite again, Brian.
It's an absolute pleasure. I mean, we were reminiscing just before the show started about, how time flies, because we last chatted prior to COVID. It was post your return from your attempt on your sadly, unfortunate, I hate to use the word failed attempt, but it was a great effort to summit K2, the most, to my knowledge, technically arduous climb and second highest mountain in the world. Is that correct?
So K2, correct. So K2 is considered to be of the 8,000 meter peaks, the hardest, the toughest. It's a beautiful pyramid, lots of technical climbing. Yes, I attempted K2, didn't make it. I got to Camp 2 on the route that I did, the Pakistan side. And yes, it's actually the way I think about mountains, it's the right way to phrase it. It was a failed attempt.
Okay.
Yes, there were many things happened on the mountain, and 8,000 meter peaks, like all mountains, there's no guarantee that you're going to make it. But I climb mountains for a bunch of reasons, but the most important one is I want to summit the mountain. So if I don't summit, I fail. So
yeah, and that's fair, And I think that it's so interesting because I think that sometimes people attach a type of stigma to the word failed. It's like, you weren't good enough type of thing, which is so not true, because it actually speaks often of being good enough because you had the courage to attempt to do it,
I agree with that. I think, Brian, I learned more from failing on mountains and not making it on the first or a second attempt than what I learned from summiting these mountains, right? So as you know, I summited Mount Everest in 2010. I tried Mount Everest in 2009. I turned around 400 meters from the summit.
Wow.
So wow. Everest is 8,848 meters high. I turned around at the balcony, 8,400 meters. I had 400 meters to still go, 4 hours of climbing at that altitude, and I turned around. It just wasn't my day. I made a cognitive, conscious decision to turn around, and I learned a truckload from that experience, from failing on my first attempt on Everest. And when I went back in 2010, what happened in 2009 made me a better climber. So I think failing for me is okay on a mountain. What's not okay for me on a mountain, Brian, and I've spoken about this before, is just giving up. So every time that I haven't summited a mountain, at least I can say I've never given up. I failed, but I've never given up. There's for me a massive distinction between failing on a mountain versus giving up on a mountain.
That's such a profound insight. Yeah, I love that. I love that because I think in so many aspects of life, there are people who give up versus fail.
And I think we often use those as they mean the same. I don't think they do. And why I love climbing mountains so much, I think it's almost like a training ground, a laboratory for life, right? And
yes.
If you, in my book, in my view, if you just simply give up on a mountain, you're going to give up in life. That's it.
Yes.
Just don't give up. That's it. Don't give up.
I so remember something you shared with me when we last spoke about being up there. And the thing you said to me was that when you're on that cliff face, when you're on that mountain, you have to be completely in the moment, because if you're not completely in the moment, you potentially could die.
When I was on K2, a very famous adventurer was with me on K2, right?
Yeah.
Mike Horn, who now lives in Switzerland. And Mike Horn is a legend, right? He South African, lives in Switzerland. He's done the craziest adventures that anybody can think of. And I think it was Mike's second or third attempt on K2. I can't remember, but what I do remember is talking to Mike at base camp on K2, and he said to me, Louis, make sure that every single step that you take is a step that's deliberate and well thought through. Every single step.
Wow.
And
wow.
You know, I've taken that to heart, Bryan. So I've been very fortunate to summit Lhotse, also as one of my 4 8,000-meter peaks. Now, Lhotse is the 4th highest in the world. It's next to Everest on the Nepal side. So you share the same route as Everest up to Camp 3, and then Everest goes left and Lhotse right. But I summited Lhotse, and in the process became the first South African to ever summit Mount Lhotse. I remember I got back to Johannesburg, and I had a conversation with the chief executive officer of a listed organization. And I've done a lot of strategy consulting work for this particular company and this particular CEO. And he asked me how the climb was, and it was all good. I summited, and he asked me, so what was your key takeaway? And I remember I said to him, as much as you and I have spoken about strategy formulation and 5-year plans and 10-year plans and analyze the environment and competitors and do all of that good stuff and strategic choices, blah, blah, blah. I said to him, the one thing I've learned on Lhotse is execution matters a lot more in the moment than strategy formulation. And so the point, Bryan, about when you climb these big mountains, 8,000-meter peaks, you never relax. You relax maybe down at your tent in base camp. But while you're on the mountain, on that rope, you focus on the next 10 seconds. You don't even focus on the hour. It's the next step. It's the next 3 minutes, the next 5 minutes.
Wow. That's so profound because, you know, if you think of it, so few people, one, have the inclination or the consciousness to want to do that, but actually have the wherewithal or the technique of being able to be in the moment. They're so busy living through time to the next event, to the next show, to the weekend, to the holiday, to the whatever, and they're moving through it that they firstly don't take the time to celebrate the victories, which is so important in building that gravitas that you're wanting to take with you. You know, you're so racing forward through time that you miss out on so much, and at the same time can also make a whole lot of mistakes.
So if I think about how long it took me to summit Mount Everest in 2010, at that stage, I've been climbing for probably about 10 to 12 years. I've done 6 of the 7 summits. You know, the 7 summits is a big, kind of a big thing in mountain climbing. It's the highest mountain on every continent. So I've done 6 of the 7 summits. I've had experience 10 to 12 years of climbing and successes and failures. And only then did I think, okay, I think I now can go to Mount Everest and give it my best shot. So it took me between 10 and 12 years to get there, a multitude of expeditions. And I'm glad I did it that way, Bryan. But I went there with a decade of a climbing experience and lessons learned, whereas I often, in the media, I read about people who, they just kind of look at Mount Everest as a bucket list item, you know, something I want to go do. And the world has changed. And I'm not judgmental about anybody today who says, listen, I think I just want to go and climb Mount Everest. And then they go to Mount Everest. And, you know, I also had a lot of Sherpa support and guides, and they have Sherpa support and guides, and they go and they summit Mount Everest. And maybe it took them 1 year of learning, and it took me 10 years of learning. So I don't judge people who do it differently to the way I did it. But I'm glad I did it the way I did it, because there was no noise for me. When I climb, there's no noise. I don't climb the mountain for accolades. I don't climb the mountain for Instagram hero shots. I don't climb mountains to be on your show. You know, I don't do it. I do it because I absolutely love doing it. But your point around stepping back and celebrating those things is important, and I do it. I sit here in my study now at home, and I've got against my wall, I've got all my mountaineering summits and my 8,000 meter summits, and I celebrate my successes. There's no question about it, and I take time to do that.
On the lighter side of it, there's a story of a chap called Bob, who, talking about bucket list stuff, and he arrives at the age of 60 and has a medical examination, and the doctor says, Bob, you're in such good shape. He says, you really are. The best shape I've seen you for a long time. He says, well, you know what I'm going to do, Doc? He says, what's that? He says, I'm going to go and climb Mount Everest. He says, Bob, really, I mean, you're in good shape and all the rest of it, but you think, no, I'm going to do this. So off he goes. And he's climbing up the mountain, and, it's a pretty rough ride. And at one point he slips and falls, and he catches onto this little outcrop of rock, and he's hanging there. And he shouts, help, 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 is anybody up there? And this voice comes down and says, yes, Bob, it's me. Who's me? He says, it's God, Bob. He says, help. He says, help. He says, Bob, have you got faith? He says, of course I've got faith. He says, then let go. He says, what? He says, no, then let go. So he looks up, he looks down, he looks up again. He says, is anybody else up there?
I can relate to that story, Brian. I can relate very well to that story.
Yeah. But I think something that we're leaving out here is a little bit of the detail around the type of training that you do to take on these giants. I mean, when you last shared it with me, it was staggering. And I just want to know, has that routine changed, or is it still much of a fitness? And share with the listeners what you do.
So for an 8,000 meter peak, it's about 6 months of very deliberate training. I also consider exercising to be different to training, right? Yeah. I exercise a lot. I go to gym, I go hiking, I go to Suikerbos in Heidelberg, and I hike, and so that's exercising. Training is when I have a goal, I'm going to go and climb this mountain, I now need to get ready for that mountain. So it's at least 6 months. Everest was about a year. And it's interesting, when I climbed all my mountains, I never had a personal trainer in gym.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm a big fan of personal trainers, but for my mountaineering, I always kind of figured things out, what works for me. So here's my routine, right? For about at least 6 months for a 8,000 meter peak. Mondays, I don't train. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, I go to gym, typically for about 2 hours. 1 hour of cardio, 1 hour of weights and resistance training. So that I do Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Friday, I take off. Saturday, I will typically go to Westcliff Stairs here in Johannesburg, 15 to 20, maybe even 25 kgs on my back. And I will do 3 hours, even 4 hours, just up and down those stairs, Westcliff Stairs, right? Up and down, up and down, up and down. And then on a Sunday, typically I will go to Suikerbos for a 6-hour hike with about 20 kgs on my back. And that's my routine in terms of deliberate training. And I don't change that routine. That's the routine that got me up on Everest, on Lhotse. That's my routine. 3 days during the week, gym, 2 days rest, weekends is between 4 and 6 hours per day. What I then also do, I've never liked running. Running. But about 3 months before I hit an 8,000 meter peak, I will go for an hour of running in the morning. So I will do, again, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays. Then I will do an hour of running at about 5 o'clock in the mornings, put in my day's work, and hit the gym for 2 hours in the evenings. That's my training routine.
Sure. And how significantly do you change or modify your diet in this preparation time?
Quite a lot.
Yeah.
Quite a lot. So, you know, I like having a beer or a glass of wine on a Friday evening. So during the week, 0 alcohol, zilch. When I train for 8,000 meter peaks, there's just, for this period of training, no alcohol, zilch. And then I have found immense value in talking to dietitians.
Yeah.
Found a wonderful dietitian last year that I was thinking about going to K2 last year. So I found this sports dietitian who are just magnificent, who gave me a program, a routine on dieting. And I stuck to that. So yeah, so the choices I make when I go and climb these mountains are very deliberate choices around diet, exercising versus training, sleep. I prioritize sleep, and then things I say no to. Just things that I don't do when I go and deliberately train for an 8,000 meter peak.
So as I'm listening to you, I can't help but draw a really exciting parallel of conversation, which is around the metaphor of this with life and leadership and approach to life. So in the situation you're in, if I sort of see it right at the top, you've got this incredible pursuit of, highly challenging and demanding and rewarding pursuits where you're literally putting your life on the line, and out of a deep sense of purpose and meaning and fulfillment. And the results are self-evident in terms of, one, the actual accomplishments themselves, but more importantly, what it means to you and has meant to you and how it shaped your life. So imagine how remarkable it would be if because you could liken this to great Olympian athletes and their pursuits for gold and things like that. They don't quite put their life, it's not life and death, but they certainly have to make very intense commitments in terms of diet, sleep, lifestyle, effort, all those sort of things. But imagine if people were able to take this type of collective discipline and practice into their daily lives of relationship, daily lives of work and business and pursuit, and how much more rich it would be for them if they could discover the joys of sacrifice, the joys of commitment, the joys of discipline, in the pursuit, not just for the sake of those, but in the pursuit of something of higher value.
So about 4 weeks ago, I did a talk at the company, and the head of sales of that particular organization climbed Kilimanjaro with me 10, 12 years ago. So he now wants to use mountaineering as almost like a metaphor for, guys, we got to hit our sales targets. But by the way, it's like climbing Kilimanjaro, right? So,
yeah,
hit this target, it's this day on Kili. You hit this target, it's day 2 on Kili, day 3, day 4, the summit, and so on. And I remember it was about 4 weeks ago. And then in the audience, so we're planning to go to Kilimanjaro in February next year. So there's a lot of time to train and get ready and all that. And in the audience was this one lady, and she put up her hand and she said to me, I would like to do it, but I'm really very, very unfit. So I said to her, listen, Here's my advice to you. Don't think about you want to climb Kilimanjaro in February next year. I said to her, this is what and she said to me, what's the practical advice that you can give me right now in this moment? I said to her, here's my advice. I said, if last night or yesterday, if you could only do one push-up, do 2 push-ups.
Yeah.
Don't go for 10 push-ups or 20 push-ups, right? If you didn't try to do one push-up yesterday, do 1 push-up today. Go and walk around the block in your suburb just once. And I said to my advice to you is just start. Just start. There's way too much, Bryan, in life today, in my experience. There's all the stuff around, you go to exclusive books and there's stuff around dreams and following your dreams, and you read books, follow your dreams, follow your dreams. Yeah, follow your dreams, but just start. Just start. Take that first step. So I absolutely believe exactly, Bryan, what you're talking about now. Taking that first step and building those habits on a daily basis, getting the discipline, getting the focus. That's what mountains gave me. That's absolutely what mountains gave me. I told you before how I got into mountaineering. I told you the story, right?
No, share the story, because I think it's so valuable for the listeners to hear that you weren't some sort of, super bionic, super kid who's done all these things,
I'll share the story. I never had any plans to climb mountains. Zero. And about 20, 25 years ago, I was at a function and I met somebody who became my best friend. And I remember we were having a braai, having a beer or two, and he said to me that his biggest ambition in life is to go and climb Mont Blanc. I, spur of the moment kind of guy, and I liked him immediately. I said, I'll go with you. So I said, but what is Mont Blanc? He said to me, it's a true story, Bryan. He said to me, no, it's the highest mountain in the Alps. I said, okay, cool. I said to him, do I need to train for mountaineering? He said to me, don't worry about it. Don't worry. We go to the Drakensberg for a hike up Mount Exalted. What he didn't tell me is that he was an ultraman athlete. He's run comrades. He's done all of these things. So for him, it was, don't worry about it. For me, had to worry about it. Anyway, went up Mount Exalted once in the Drakensberg, 3,200 meters, and I suffered. But anyway, got on the plane, had no idea what gear to take, what gear to buy. I arrived in Mont Blanc or in Chamonix with my friend. I remember very proudly, I showed them some of the stuff I bought in Johannesburg for this climb. And I bought this pair of boots, and I asked the guide in Chamonix, are these good boots? He said to me, yes, good boots for disco, right? But not good boots to climb. Anyway, we were amateurs, had to go and get the right gear in Chamonix, summited Mont Blanc, right? And I suffered and I didn't like it. I came back, and this friend of mine then said to me, like, okay, I've done Kili, you should go do Kili. I did Kilimanjaro. I did not like it, right, at all. And I remember I summited Kilimanjaro the first time on the 31st of December, 1998. And I stood on that summit and I said to myself, never again will I want to do this. Got back down, 242 mountains. In the plane on the way back to Joburg, there was an in-flight magazine with an article about a mountain called Aconcagua, which is the highest in South America, but also the highest then in the Western Hemisphere. And I thought to myself, 242, I'm going to give Aconcagua a shot, right? Bryan, I went to Aconcagua the first time, I failed. I went the second time, I failed. And what mountains gave me was this crossroad in my life where after I failed the second time, and by the way, mountaineers are the best people in the world to come up with excuses when you don't summit a mountain, right? The weather. The most famous one that we use is the weather was bad. So, Another one is my guide was bad. Another one is I got sick. That's also a good one. I had a stomach bug. Those are well thought through excuses. So anyway, I failed twice on Aconcagua, and I had to confront the issue, and the issue was me. And when I do my talks on mountains, I have a slide where I show exactly that moment where I looked in the mirror and said, I'm the problem. Because up to that point in life, kind of breezed through school, didn't do well at school at all, breezed through university, just wanted to get a degree, didn't do well, didn't apply myself, started working. I was just kind of like, coasting through life. And on Aconcagua, those two failures on that mountain changed my life. And this I can tell you in no uncertain terms, that when I decided to take full, total, and utter accountability for my failures on Aconcagua, instead of blaming external factors for my failures, that's when my life changed. And there is absolutely no question about it that if it wasn't for those failures on Aconcagua and me taking full accountability for failures, I think my life would have been, I would have lived a different life compared to the one that I have lived. So that's what mountains gave me. And from that moment onwards, that's when I started to get serious about stuff, maybe the first time in my life. And I got serious about mountains. And then it was, you want to go and climb a mountain, you get your focus sorted. You get your discipline sorted. You get your habits sorted. You say no to a bribe with your mates on a Friday evening when you need to get tracking on Saturday morning at 5 o'clock with training. Those are the choices and the sacrifices. But that's mountains, Bryan. But without discipline, you're not going to get there. And it's your point about metaphor for life. No discipline in life, you ain't going to get anyway. Sorry. It's the way life works.
You know what's coming to mind as I'm listening to you speak is two things, actually. One something I share with people often is a practice I have in my life, because I'm resonating with that moment of unashamed self-honesty. Is stuff happens in life, and you get some uncool people who do stuff to you and all the rest of it. And we can all look back over our lives and find situations where we had things, inverted commas, done to us. But what I learned quite early on was that may be, and it may be that somebody else outside of yourself is to blame for what happened. But you have to take responsibility and accountability of how you receive it and where you go with it. And so for me, the question I always ask and suggest that people ask in any situation is, what did I do to put myself in that position? Because when you start doing that, you might often discover that there are patterns here, that this isn't the first time this has happened. In fact, it's happened a couple of times in different ways, in different shapes and forms, but the common denominator is you and yourself, even inadvertently, even with the best of intentions, setting yourself up for this to happen. And unless you start asking yourself the questions of what have I done in any situation to contribute to that situation, there's very little room for learning.
So Bryan, I think of course there's always experiences or situations in life that's really out of our control, right? Where
yes,
we bad stuff really happen to people, and they have no control over those events, nor do they have any control, quite frankly, about how to respond to that. There's some horrible events going on in the world today.
yes.
But my frame of reference when I use these examples is it's outside of those extreme.
Yeah, no, exactly.
situations.
Exactly, yeah.
And I think for me, this thing around what I've learned, and it's tied to what you said, what you learned at a young age, is I cannot outsource my life decisions to other people.
No.
I can't outsource it to my parents, can't outsource it to my friends, work colleagues, bosses. You just can't do that. Ask for advice, have a mentor, have a coach, but own your life and own your life's decisions.
Yeah.
Own your successes, own your failures. That's it. And on mountains, especially now that I'm more experienced and I don't use guides on mountains anymore, which is for me part of my own learning and growth as a high altitude mountaineer, is this thing about I'm making decisions. I make decisions when I go, do I want to go up tomorrow in a rotation or do I not? I'll ask somebody for advice. What's the weather saying tomorrow? I make the decision, right? I make the decision how far I climb today to acclimatize. Do I want to sleep at 7,000 meters or do I want to touch 7,000 meters and go down to a lower altitude? And it's such a profound learning in my life has been this thing around you just can't outsource your life's decisions to other people. Own your life and own your life decisions.
And I think that there's something else that you're touching on there that's so important, and that is, and it's sometimes not easy for people to do that, and sometimes the situation is in a way more complex than, and I'm not taking anything away from the climb of an 8,000 meter climb, but the factors are there and they're there to be seen. How do you qualify the decision criteria? Or have you qualified the decision criteria? On what basis are you making the decision that you're making? Have you really considered what is on the table and what's at stake and what are the dependencies and what are the variables and what are the things you can't control, in this? And then what does that mean? And how are you going to deal with the contingencies when you have to or when things don't go according to plan? And I think that there's so little of that done. So often the decisions that are made for what's the gain, what are we going to get out of it, how much, what, etc., and what do we have to do to get that? And that's not really the criteria.
I've been very fortunate in my climbing to have climbed with some really exceptionally good mountaineers. Right?
Yes.
In South Africa, people like climbers like Sean Disney, Alex Harris, a mate of mine, Tony Van Marken, now lives in Canada. People I've learned from, right? Where I could see how they make decisions on mountains.
Yes.
And how they consider all the factors and all the dependencies and the choices and the trade-offs. Been very fortunate also in the early stages of my mountaineering career to have climbed with giants, people like Mike Hamill, who's he runs one of the biggest mountaineering guide companies in the world today. He's an American guy. My Sherpa, I did two 8,000 meter peaks with this particular Sherpa called Asona. And for 10, 12 years, I learned from these people, right? And I was like, I sat at their feet and whatever I could take in, I took in. And then once I've seen how they make decisions and assess the environment and assess the conditions, and safety is a big thing in mountaineering. And I remember doing in Mount Vinson in Antarctica, and I went specifically to climb, I selected a certain guide that I wanted to climb with. And we would get to a camp and, Vern will go and we would take his ice axe and he would make sure that, it's a flat surface and he would take time and make sure it's safe. And I would say to myself, but, I think it's safe. And he said, Louis, thinking is going to get you killed, right? You've got to go and test your assumptions. Don't just say, this looks safe. He says, you take your ice axe, you take your ski pole, you prod, right? And I learned from these guys. And now where I climb unguided, but with Sherpa support, of course, and with logistical support,
Yeah.
and where I make my decisions, I hope that I can maybe impart some of my learnings for 12, 15 years climbing with the best there is, and how that shaped my decision making on a mountain. I hope that I can now teach other people about how to make decisions and how to, how to prop for safety and how to look at your choice and your trade-offs. But again, mountains is about decision making. And chance is a big thing also in mountains, Brian. Is it just chance, right?
Yeah.
But ultimately, this thing around, I go to mountains, I've got a clear objective. I want to summit the mountain.
Yeah.
If I don't summit the mountain, I have failed on the mountain. That's my wrapping of the context. I might have had a good time. I might have given it my best shot, but I failed. I didn't summit. And then, and after every expedition, I always take a notebook. And within a day or two, I just write. What did I learn? What did I learn? What did I learn? Every single expedition I've been on, I've got a diary. And at the back end of that diary, every single expedition, what did I learn? How will I climb differently next time? So I think without that learning orientation, I would not have been the climber that I am today. Because I still consider myself, I'm striving to be a good 8,000 meter climber. I haven't arrived yet, even with 4 8,000 meter summits. My vision is to be a really good 8,000 meter climb. I've got some more mountains to go and climb before I can one day sit back and say, I'm a good 8,000 meter climber. I'm not there yet. I need to learn some more.
But thinking, and that's wonderful, Louis, and I think that'll hold you in such incredible stead. My point, if I think of it in the world of work and the world of life, is that you've got so many people who get affected by hubris in some shape or form and think that they've arrived, and don't have anything more to learn. And in fact, they therefore have so much more to learn, but sadly miss that opportunity to really become significant rather than just successful.
I absolutely agree with that, Brian. I think that being a lifelong learner is such a wonderful kind of anchor for life. And whether you learn from reading books or climbing mountains, or you learn from friends and colleagues, or you learn from your children, you learn from your spouse, whomever, having a learning mindset, I think it's one of the keys to a life of significance and a life of meaning. I'm reading a fascinating book currently. It's called What to Make of a Life. It's a brand new book out by Jim Collins. Now, Jim Collins.
Oh, really? Yes, of course. Good to Great.
Good to Great. And he wrote all of those books. And now he's written, I bought this book this weekend, What to Make of a Life. And he talks about, in the book, cliffs. He says, we all get to cliffs. And, and it's all the choices you make on your way to the cliff, falling over the cliff, and what do you do after that? How do you make these choices? How do you learn? What do you keep in your bag of tricks? What do you let go of? I think it's as relevant in mountains as it is in life. Yes. My first 8,000 meter peak was in 2008 when I summited Joy U, 6th highest in the world. If I look at when I summited Everest 2 years later, I summited Manaslu in 2013. I summited Lhotse I think 2018. If I look at my Lhotse 8,000 meter behavior versus my Joy U 8,000 meter behavior, fundamentally different.
Wow.
And when I go to my next 8,000 meter peak, that will be fundamentally different compared to 2018 and 2019. But it's learning, Brian. It's learning. It's this thing about confidence with humility.
Yes.
It's this thing about humility always. You can have all the confidence in the world. There's no place for arrogance.
No.
But confidence from a foundation of humility, I think that's the key to a life of learning.
And I think that you could even, and forgive me, I've got a passion for words, and words say so much. I think one could even say that the term could be assuredness, even more than confidence. Confidence is the expression of that assuredness, because when you're assured in your heart and mind of who you are and what you're doing, the fact that there's an external expression of confidence and a seeing of that and feeling of that by outside people, what's most important is that inner assuredness of that I'm actually in the right place and I'm doing the right thing.
And I think to build on that is that one of the things I've done in my life is trying to figure out what am I good at and what am I not good at.
Yeah.
Right. So, like all boykies growing up in this country, I wanted to play for rugby for the Springboks.
Yeah.
No chance. No chance. No chance. Right. So all this stuff I read in magazines, you can be whatever you want. No, you can't be. Brian, I could never do those things, right? But once I figured out what I'm good at,
yes,
right, and I could leave the things out that I'm not good at. I like your term, assuredness. So when I go to an 8,000 meter mountain, I have a very high level of assuredness about that particular mountain. I have the confidence to go to any 8,000 meter peak in the world today.
Yes.
There's not a single 8,000 meter peak that I will not go and attempt to climb. That's confidence. The assuredness is I've got the learning, I've got the skills, I've got the experience, I've got the expertise to go. And then I go to the next 8,000 meter peak. Whether I make it or I don't make it, there's still the reflection afterwards.
Yes.
Writing things down, and not for me on an iPad. Notebook with a pen.
Yes. Yes.
What did I learn from this?
When you were talking earlier, something struck me that I thought was very important, and it's important as a life lesson, is that in this pursuit that you've chosen over these years, I would imagine that whilst I'm sure you have other facets of life that you enjoy and you have, there's less space for other things. This is about being focused. This is about being dedicated and committed and fulfilled through that. And as an options person myself, I often fall foul of myself in wanting to do too many things and not ending up doing a whole lot of them justice, And I think that the lesson I can take away from you in this is how gratifying it is to commit yourself to clear sense of purpose, whether it's in solely one thing or more, but there's not much space for many more, but that one thing that you really excel at and do well,
So it comes back to, for me, I was at school, and like all school kids, you play rugby, you play cricket, and you do athletics, right? I never excelled at any of these things. I went to varsity and I played rugby and I played soccer, right?
Yes.
I've always enjoyed it.
Yes.
Then after varsity, you start working, you don't play sports anymore. But exercise, you go to gym once a week and you feel good about life, right? And at some stage, I have figured out that I liked adrenaline sports.
Yes.
So and it started when I did my first skydive. and I liked skydiving.
Yes, loved it. Me too. Yeah.
So I did skydiving. Then I decided, geez, I like this stuff. I'm going to do something more with adrenaline. I'm going to do scuba diving. So now I was doing skydiving and scuba diving.
Yeah.
I've always liked motorbikes, right? So now I've got skydiving, scuba diving, motorbikes, and then I discovered mountaineering, right?
Yeah.
Just too many things.
Yes.
I had to, what I did, I let go of skydiving. I stopped skydiving, stopped scuba diving, sold my motorbike. Family, work and career, mountains.
Yeah.
That's my life.
Yeah.
There's no space for noise. There's no space for doing 10 things at 50%. I want to
Yes.
do one thing at 95%,
Yes.
which is my mountains.
And the thing is that people won't know what they don't know. They won't know what they're missing by not crossing that threshold of moving up to that next level of commitment and immersing of oneself into something that does exactly what it's done for you, is to create a state of continuous learning, a state of gratitude. You know, I've actually talked about this once before. It's something that I've just sort of cottoned onto in my head. It sounds a bit esoteric, but I think it's very real, is that it's wonderful to step into moments of gratitude, but it's fantastic to have gratitude step inside of you, where it becomes core to your being, where in and through what you do and how you go about what you do and how you express it, it is a statement of gratitude.
I 100% with you on that. And that's why for me, you know, to have climbed these mountains, it's been a life of privilege. It's a privilege to have done this. And it's a life that I never thought that I would live when I went to varsity, and after varsity started working, all of that. And my gratitude is immense towards those that I learned from, how to make good choices in mountains. But it is, as you say, Bryan, you know, the from a values perspective, mountains gave me humility, assuredness, confidence, gratitude, lifelong learning. And it keeps me from ever getting to the point where I'm saying, geez, I'm now a really cool climber. I'm a really cool mountaineer. I know I will never get there, because there's just so much more that I can learn in this world of high altitude mountaineering. I think my best years in climbing lie ahead of me, and it's not in my past. My future in climbing will be better than my past in climbing.
Louis, that is so beautiful. And believe it or not, we've come to the end of the show. So that was perfect timing, but I don't know how you did it, but that was wonderful. And all I can say is mazel tov, congratulations, kudos, everything to you. And may you go from strength to strength, and may the mountains you climb become more and more fulfilling and rewarding. And may you have many, many years doing it. And I look forward to seeing you outside of the studio when we can get time. But very well done, and all the very best.
Thank you, Bryan. It was an absolute privilege to be on your show. So thank you very much.
And just to remind you all that if you're not with the ones you love, love the ones you're with, and take time to show and tell the ones you love how much you do. And take some time to love yourselves. Just take time to reflect and just think about what's the next best thing you could do to make your life great. Have a wonderful week. Take care of each other, and just do no harm.